I can't make a motion, but if I could, that's what I would do.
But what we do here tonight is not a site approval, is it?
Yes.
One of it.
It is?
Yes. We're undoing what
We
we
gotta
did at the
rescind
last meeting.
first.
We're basically
Yes, it is
undoing
a
what
site
we did
plan
at the last
approval.
meeting
All right.
and starting to go forward with it with the correct 50-foot
But it's
buffer.
not final, is it?
Yes, this is absolutely final.
Okay.
And I would strongly recommend against that, against postponement.
We are doing what we can legally do.
Correct.
Can you address Bernie's question?
I'll go back to what I said to begin with. If there is an agreement between the parties, the developer or the owner of the property is in agreement to have a condition on their site plan, that is certainly something that you can make as a condition on the site plan approval. And I think it's quite possible that Costco may not have a problem with it being a condition, the certain things they're agreeing to being conditions on the site plan approval. But I think the issue is that when they were here at the last meeting, they were here under a mistaken belief that they were going to have that 50-foot area rezoned to C1, and of course figuratively they had a hammer over their head, and I think they're not changing what they said they would do at that time. At least that's what we've all been told, but then let's get to the point of, can we put it on as a condition, and should we delay it? You know, the question becomes, I mean, I think we can do that, but, you know, you're going to have meetings and meetings. You're already having a special meeting tonight, and at least it's not going to be what it was going to be, because if you'd had to rezone the property, there would have been several meetings, and two by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So even if you were to delay it till we try to get some sort of writing agreed to, whether or not Costco is interested in making that, you know, when you make something a condition and then for some reason it doesn't get worked out because one party or the other is being maybe a little unreasonable or something, then what you're putting the town in a position of putting a condition. Our processes are being used to maybe arguably inappropriately to force somebody to agree to something that legally we didn't have the right to require them to agree.
Let me say it maybe a way. I know you in your profession there's things you can say and not say. But I can definitely, you know, like put my opinion to you all if I was in your shoes. The pros to cons. The con to me, if I was considering pros and cons, would be, okay, I'm going to open myself up to exposure. During this negotiation, or if this thing becomes protracted, you know, they can basically say, we don't agree to it, it's 50 feet, we're going to stay with what we want. And you all don't have any leverage on that. So when that window's, you know, this thing's, I'm not thinking for them at all, but the potential is there for somebody to think in terms of, well, this is going to take a protracted amount of time, and it's going to affect our timeline for construction to be in operation by a certain date. Our whole economic model is built on startup of this store at this date. So if it's going to affect that, and they think that's, you know, that this is going to be a problem, and there's a downside potential there too for waiting.
We need you to please, if you will, just stay over here so if you're going to talk, you can get up the microphone.
I'm not suggesting an open-ended thing. I mean, put some constraint on it, some reasonable constraint, and say, hey, we're going to meet again in, I don't know what's reasonable. I think. But with some effort, those can be resolved fairly expeditiously. And anyway, that's all I was saying is we agree completely that this can't be open-ended. But it did.
It's not your turn yet, Bob.
Given the circumstances, it might make sense to postpone rather than get into a.
But Gary, there are things that we have the legal right to do tonight that we can do. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, I strongly recommend we follow what I put in as far as a recommendation of motion. You know, when we're talking about constraining this process, we've already constrained it. So, you know, let's not double down on that and constrain it again with a larger burden.
Anybody else have any questions?
The original site plan that we approved last meeting, what did we think the buffer was?
100 feet.
And Costco drew a site plan based upon that. Is that correct?
I haven't seen the site plan, but I would assume so, yeah.
No, the site plan was based on a 50-foot
Oh,
because
yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
the town staff told Costco it was 50 feet, and in fact, it was 50 feet. Well, then at the sort of during the week before your meeting is when the thought became, and I don't know where it originated, but anyway, and I think it was those maps that were adopted, and they were erroneous. The map, when they scaled the width of the buffer, and they had to scale it. It didn't say 100 feet on there. It didn't say 50 feet. It was scaled, and they scaled it with the scale, and it scaled out to be 100 feet. Well, that was wrong because it had never been 100 feet. And you can't, in effect, rezone somebody's property without them knowing about it. And in effect, that's what would have happened had we continued to stand on a 100-foot buffer and then require them to come in and get it rezoned down to 50. We were basically requiring them to do what we didn't have to do when we so-called expanded it to 100 feet, which we really never did, at least in my legal opinion. The fact that we had an erroneous map doesn't cause a rezoning. The zoning is what the zoning is. It was 50 feet, and it never changed. And the fact that people operated on the misassumption that it was 100 feet is what caused the problem, but it's sort of irrelevant from a legal standpoint. It's a 50-foot buffer. And so what we're trying to do here is to because Costco did do their site plan based on a 50-foot buffer, what we're trying to do is make sure that they're not unfairly, inappropriately disadvantaged by having to jump through a bunch of hoops that they shouldn't have to jump through, that only came to be because we erroneously told them it was 100 feet, and nobody did it on purpose. It was all just happened, and we're just trying to get it fixed.
So the Powell Acre residents are content with the 50-foot buffer. Is that correct? Or based upon the agreement you have, 50 feet is not a problem. Is that correct? Okay.
That would be correct. My name's Greg Whalen. I live at 112 Ida Hertzler in Powell Acres. When we met with some of the town staff and reviewed the site plans presented by Costco, at that particular time, we were under the impression that we had a 100-foot buffer, and the site plan showed 50 feet. And we never, nor have we have never tried to stop the development or create an adversarial relationship. So we felt like, well, it shows 50 feet. We thought it was 100, but we'd be willing to accept the 50-foot buffer if we could enhance some of the protections between the Costco development and Powell Acres, like an increase in the density of the landscape, the planning in the landscape plan. And we talked to you all about our flooding conditions on Turkey Creek and the use of the wet weather conveyance to drain half of the footprint of the Costco site. not that much water's never been turned down that wet weather conveyance. And it's, I've seen it go from average about a 3-foot deep ditch to probably 6 feet deep already. There's a lot of scouring and sediment transport which goes into Turkey Creek. So we were looking, we felt like if they're going to turn that much water loose down that wet weather conveyance, that it should be stabilized to the extent possible, not knowing exactly what would be the right thing to do. And so we presented that as a condition we'd like to see when the site plan's approved. And in the meeting on the 21st of July, it sounded reasonable to everyone that was present, yet at that time no one knew exactly what needed to be done, and it sounded like, my impression at the meeting was that we were going to get some support from Farragut staff, the stormwater, to look at the stormwater issues and what it would take to stabilize that bank to make it a satisfactory drainage way for the water leaving the Costco site. And then also, since we have the flooding conditions we have, we're right on the very edge on Turkey Creek about water actually getting up into the homes there. We ask for a retention basin size that would be adequate for a 200-year rain event rather than the 100 on the site plan. So those kinds of things were probably modest in cost, and in good faith we thought that the buffer was being reduced to 50 feet and it would help us protect our property there on Powell Acres. And then the last thing, of course, was the ugly retention wall that was on the site plan, which was a gabion retention wall, pretty ugly, not very good to look at. So we were looking for some improvement there, and pretty much when we met with Mr. Rutter at Dick Kaywood's house, he agreed that the gabion wall was unsightly. In his words, you can do different things with them, but you can put lipstick on a pig, but when you get done, it's still a pig. So he was going to ask his design engineers to relook at the retention wall and see if they could make some improvements in that regard. And I think we've got some feedback from through Mr. Rosell that he did indeed get approval to make improvements to that retention wall, and that was the item of probably the largest expense. So we're in agreement with Costco. Of course, it was based on a false assumption that we had more than a 50-foot buffer, but we're happy with what's been proposed by Costco. We're okay with a 50-foot buffer. I mean, it is what it is, but we don't want the town of Farragut to abandon us just because it's 50 feet and it's always been 50 feet. We still need protection from stormwater runoff. We still need protection from visual pollution, from lighting, noise. Need something, to attenuate the noise coming from the Costco operation. So that's why we're here. We need your help. We don't have a leverage or a hammer over Costco by any means, but don't forget about us. Thank you.
Tom,
and I don't think any of that changes from what I've heard from Costco. But the issue that I have to always be mindful of as the town attorney is that we as a municipality have the authority that the state of Tennessee gives us under the statutes of the state of Tennessee.